deductive argument. Valid argument. Invalid argument. Sound argument. Unsound argument. Inductive argument. Weak argument. Strong argument. Cogent argument. Uncogent argument. So try to conjure up some definitions for those from your notes and what we've talked about, and then if you'd like, I can check it over and make sure you're on the right track. Or maybe on Wednesday, I'll give you the definitions for all of those. So you need to know that. You also need to know how these concepts work. So I'll give you some true-false questions. They might be ones like this. If an argument is valid, then it's sound. True or false?
False.
False. False. How can an argument be valid and yet not be sound? Because that's a false premise, yeah. All right? So you need to know how to answer questions like that. Next, you should be familiar with those argument patterns, modus ponens, modus tollens. Right?
Modus tollens.
Modus ponens.
NP.
Modus tollens. And there's two fallacies, the fallacy of denying the antecedent and the fallacy of affirming the consequent. You should know what they are. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an argument or two, and I might ask you, is this a good argument or not? And what I'm looking for there is, first, tell me what kind of arguments we've got. Second, what conditions make an argument of that type good? So you'd say, hey, this argument's a deductive argument. Kurt, for a deductive argument to be good, it has to be valid, and the premises have to be true. The argument you've given me, Kurt, is one that's valid, but it has a false premise. Therefore, the argument's not a good deductive argument, that kind of thing. So if you recognize that your argument is an example of modus ponens or modus tollens, then you can say, look, this argument has a good form, it's modus ponens. Or if you recognize that the argument is an example of denying the antecedent, then you can point that out. Say, hey, Kurt, this is an argument, and it's not a good deductive argument because it commits the fallacy of denying the antecedent. Okay, that kind of thing. Next, you need to know what the criteria of adequacy are. You need to tell me what is the term criteria of adequacy talking about? I mean, what are we talking about? And then you need to tell me what these criteria are, right? Simplicity, scope, fecundity, conservatism, simplicity, whatever they are. There's 5 of them. Right? And you need to make sure you give me statements where you tell me what these are. Remember, you want to avoid this problem where we say, scope, the amount of diverse phenomena explained, period. Well, that's not going to cut it. Because your friend isn't going to say, well, what about the amount? More is better, less is better? I mean, what? So you want to make sure you write complete statements when you're talking about this. Yes?
You're explaining the purpose of them?
Yeah, what is adequacy for what?
Okay.
Right? Yeah. And you want to say, well, the best explanatory hypothesis or something like that. Then you need to know what are necessary and sufficient conditions, and how can you use the notion of necessary and sufficient conditions to unpack a concept. And you can use, if it's appropriate, the bachelor case where you explain what's going on. Like we did here. Each of these conditions is individually necessary for this, and they are jointly sufficient to this. And remember, what I'm looking for here in an answer is, could I show this answer to a friend of mine, and they look at it and say, oh, I follow, I understand. Okay. So if you're using technical terms, you want to explain the technical term. In other words, help me out. I'm assuming you know what's going on, but you need to convince me, okay? And the criteria is, could I show it to a friend of mine? And they say, oh, I see clearly exactly what's going on. That's good. Then lastly, we have some epistemology stuff. And when it comes to epistemology stuff, you need to tell me first, what's the difference between propositional knowledge, knowledge by acquaintance, and performative knowledge? Maybe give an example of each. And that's at the very, very beginning of chapter 7, the first page of chapter 7. Okay? And then you need to give me what we've got up here. The necessary and sufficient conditions for knowing that something is the case. The necessary and sufficient conditions for propositional knowledge. And that's at the very first 2 pages, I think it is, of chapter 7.2. Now, if you do something like this, of course, you need to explain to your friend. For example, what the hell does that mean? Sir? What is P? What's that? Okay? Everybody with me?
Mm.
Okay. So, as I said, when we have a review, I'll go over whatever you want me to go over. I'm not going to just repeat stuff that you already might know. So the onus is on you to have questions. If there's things you don't understand, if you want me to check over answers as given, Kurt, look at this. Is this okay? I'll be more than happy to do that. All right?
Wow.